My name's Timothy Rankin and I'm the manager of the educational media production team here at Italy. So we do this sort of stuff day to day. So we're kind of just aiming to empower people to create their own video footage and output their own media. In those instances where, as I said, you can't access something like the DLU program or the media from other places. So yeah, empowering people to create their own content. All right. So first of all, I would like to, the University of Queensland acknowledges the traditional owners of the custodianship of lands in which we meet. We pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, and we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So, what are we going to be talking about today? So, as the title suggests, we're going to be talking about how to create a video with your smartphone. And they often say that the best camera you have is the one you have in your pocket. And phones nowadays, they are incredibly capable of producing really, really nice video footage. We often laugh here and in our media team here that we have all these very fancy, expensive cameras that can $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 setups. And you spend all this time setting them up and getting the exposure right and focus and all that sort of stuff. When you have someone, who just picks up their phone, points it and presses record, and it looks really, really nice. So yeah, they're very, very capable. And so you can produce some really, really nice stuff. So today we're going to talk through the process of producing a video with your phone. Mainly focusing on the pre-production, so the planning and the storyboarding, and then also the production, the actual filming. Just some tips and tricks on how to film effectively with your phone. And we'll briefly talk about post-production. We do have other courses running that cover that. So we actually have a course running tomorrow on editing. So if you haven't jumped onto that, you can have a look at the schedule and enroll in that. I'll be taking that one as well. Yeah, and also there's also a writing course that is offered through Workday, and I'll have the link in here so you can see it. And that's also a bit of a companion as well. So how to actually write effective scripts and storyboards and plan out shoots for educational media. So what do you need? So obviously people, you'll need some kind of storyboard. So that is how you start planning your production. And people sort of are a little bit unsure what a storyboard is, but a storyboard is kind of a script and also like a shot list. So generating sort of what's been spoken and also shot by shot how you're going to actually film and what's going to actually appear on screen. So we'll talk about that. Obviously, you need some kind of phone. And when I say phone, it doesn't have to be top of the line. A lot of phones, maybe in the last few years, have really, really excellent cameras on them. A lot of them even have quite good zoom capabilities as well, really nice in low light. So yeah, you don't have to have a whiz-bang phone. And a lot of these skills that I'll talk about here can translate quite well into if you're using, say, a GoPro as well, or you're going to be using, maybe you have an SLR or a video camera that you might want to translate those skills from here using those other kind of devices. Editing programs, so you're going to need something to actually edit your videos in. So luckily you have access to Adobe Premiere and Adobe Rush. So they come with your Adobe Creative Cloud subscriptions. And if you have a Mac, you'll have something like iMovie on there that can edit for free. And also you can get DaVinci Resolve, which is another free video editing program that you can get on Mac and Windows. So yeah, you certainly don't have to pay for any video editing software. It's all either free or you already have access to it. Tomorrow's course that I'm running, that is done in Adobe Premiere. And Premiere is, although it's a little bit more complicated than other bits of software, it is really good because it works really, really nice with the UQ approved branding and templates, whereas other bits of software don't. So yeah, that's why we've sort of changed from more simpler programs to using Premiere. And obviously you need some creativity and persistence. So obviously that's important. You need to, start generating ideas about what you want your videos to be, what you want them to look like, and be persistent. And so, be very diligent in your planning out your shots, getting your actors and your talent ready and finding nice locations to film. So yeah, creativity and persistence always pay off. All right. So what is the screen production process? So this is a process that we use every day in our production. Here at Italy, we create educational media for a wide range of courses across the university, across every faculty in every school. So we use this process every single day in producing our material. And so 3 stages: pre-production, production, and post-production. So pre-production is where you start thinking about the format of your video. So what actually is your video going to look like? What kind of style is it going to have? And then you can think about writing a storyboard. So mapping out what needs to be said, what needs to be seen, how it's going to look, etc. Then we talk about production. So this is actually going out in the field, filming your video. And obviously, you need to make sure that you have filming locations locked in, that you have permission to be in that building or that location. Also, finding people who are comfortable to be in front of camera, that can be quite difficult as well. So we do coaching as well. So next week, there is a course on offer for coaching people to be in front of a camera. We have a studio here that we do a lot of videos, so we do coaching. So it really comes down to getting people comfortable in front of a camera, and you know, if you have someone who's a bit unsure, a bit nervous about being on camera, you know, you do have the option of using things like teleprompters, having the text for them to actually just read straight off the text. Also encourage them to be a little bit more animated in front of the camera. So the way I'm kind of here at the moment, I'm kind of moving my hands a lot. I'm talking a lot louder, being a lot more animated. Whereas if I was talking to an individual person, I probably wouldn't be as animated and as melodic with my tone. So that's kind of important to when you have people in front of a camera, you need to kind of jazz them up. We use the term U times 2, which means you want to sort of jazz them up. They're like twice as much personality coming across. So that's kind of important. And something we'll touch on briefly today, but obviously is important, but is covered in other courses, is post-production. So this is, you know, ingesting the files into your computer. And it's very, very important to have very good file management. So you want to make sure that all your stuff is in a central location, because unfortunately, you know, if files are missing, particularly video files, if you move, if you rename them, and because they're quite large, they don't really work going onto cloud storage and things like that. That can be quite problematic. So it's normally editing quite locally and just having really efficient file structures in place. So yeah, editing, exporting, and uploading. So exporting is another thing that people get very confused about. What quality do you export your video at? What size do you export your video at? There's all these kind of concerns that I'll briefly touch over, but more of that in the course that runs tomorrow. All right. So pre-production, planning, and script writing. Now, when I say script writing, this is kind of interchangeable. You might hear people say script writing, you might people say storyboarding, and so they kind of go hand in hand. Also, shot list, you might hear those kind of terms, and they roughly mean roughly the same sort of thing. And essentially, it's planning out your particular shot, and they're putting it on paper and mapping it out. But before you can plan that and map it out, you've got to decide what kind of video you want to produce. Now, of course, these 3 video types here, they're not an exhaustive list, of course. There's hundreds of different types of video types out there. Like we have a suite of, I haven't even counted, I probably should, maybe 20 to 30 or something different kind of video styles that we might produce. And these are only just a few. I chose these because I thought these might be the main ones that people might be interested in doing. So there's presenting to camera interspersed with video footage or images, or what we call B-roll. So B-roll is when you sort of cut away to another shot that's not the primary person speaking. So presenting to camera, so this could be someone presenting an experiment. So they're talking to camera, they're talking through a particular process, and then it might cut away to other shots within the same scene. So they might be demonstrating a piece of equipment or something else within the scene. Or it might just be you cutting away to pictures of students that you filmed or images of something else that you cut into the edit. The other option is if people are not comfortable being on camera, it might just be video footage or images with voiceover. So you might record a PowerPoint presentation or something and you record voiceover for it, or you might film something and then you decide that you'll do a voiceover later on. So that's a really, really good option if a person isn't comfortable on camera and you want to go down that route. Another thing that you may not have thought about in your courses, but is something really, really good to consider, the filming of interviews. So we find that students really, really like hearing real world perspectives from people in this industry. So that's something we try to do a lot of here at Italy, is going out and filming people in industry, other academics, interviewing students. People really appreciate hearing student perspectives on things as well. And so, yeah, we find those really, really beneficial to student learning. Something else to consider when you're creating your videos is to try and keep them within a reasonable length. So there's sort of a few schools of thought out there and research done, but some people say from 5 to 10 minutes is optimal for this kind of learning videos. We sort of say around about 7 to 12. Obviously, that's if something needs to be longer, it can be. I mean, I kind of broke my own rule. Literally, the next slide has a video example that I think is 14 or 15 minutes long. But keeping it fairly short, and this is important because students are quite time poor and they have little chunks of time that they can watch these videos. But if you find that a video you're creating is going to go for like 40 minutes, maybe split it up into smaller chunks that are more easily sort of watchable by students. So an example of presenting to camera. This is an experiment of someone presenting to camera, and then it cuts away to shots within the scene. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this reasonably well.
ESR, or electron spin resonance, is a kind of magnetic spectroscopy that can probe the structure of molecules, especially if they have a single unpaired electron. Its diverse uses show up in fields like material physics, chemistry, geology, and even...
So he talks along, and then throughout the video, it's then interspersed with, say, close-ups when he's talking about a particular item. We'll get a bit closer to that shot. There's also interspersed with images that explain in a little bit more detail what he's speaking about. And then so just continues to sort of cut back and forth. And that's another really nice way to sort of jazz up and make a video more interesting. Is a lot of people would kind of think, just point a camera at someone, press record, and they explain something. But it's nice to also just get shots of other things within the scene that you can focus in on when you are doing your filming, just to break things up a bit. And also, sorry, I just had someone just walk in. We're doing a new video for Italy, promoting Italy services, and I'm getting filmed doing my presentation off to the side here. So yeah, we'll just ignore. Thank you, Jonathan. He's taken lovely photographs of me. So getting in closer to the action is a really, really effective way of sort of breaking up shots as well. And so this sort of proceeds in that kind of format. Another option is, sorry, that's the same option, is voiceover video. So in this particular case, we had someone who was demonstrating a particular procedure in a lab. And essentially what we did was we went out and we filmed doing that. And then they recorded the voiceover at a later time. And this is kind of effective when maybe what the person is doing is difficult for that person to speak about as they're doing it, might be unsafe, or they're just not comfortable and they'd rather just demonstrate the process and then essentially have a voiceover done at a later time. So yeah, these are really, really effective ways of demonstrating quite complex things without the person having to worry about remembering large pieces of dialogue. So
in the low and high level markers.
I'll unmute that for a bit.
If the level is too low, gently remove the exhaust bottle and fill with tap water. Avoid bending the exhaust hose while removing.
That's another example. All right. So interviews. So there's a few different ways you can do interviews. So here at Italy, we do one-person interviews and two-person interviews. And again, this often comes down to whether a person is quite comfortable being in front of the camera or not. So if the interviewer is not so comfortable being on camera, they may choose to just film the responses from the person. So in this case, we had a bit of text pop up with the question, and then we only got the response. So these are a really, really good way of getting the information out, but not having to sort of jump back and forth. It also can save time and make the interviews a bit shorter as well, and also makes people who may not like to be on camera a bit more comfortable. So that's another option for you. And then, of course, there's the multicam interview. And I'll talk about composition as well a little bit later on, because composition is quite important for these. So it's one thing to just get the camera and focus on something, but there is important compositional things you need to sort of be aware of in order to effectively compose a particular shot to make it look nice. So in this particular case, it's a two-sided interview. This did use two cameras, so that's something to consider when you are developing your material with your phones is, having two cameras versus one camera. Obviously, if you have two cameras, it is nice to maybe use both the same phone or same kind of phone, because if you're mixing kinds of phones, they might give different results, different qualities. So that's another thing to consider. So when you've decided on your format, it's time to develop your storyboard. So the storyboard, as I've mentioned, is a bit of a hybrid between a script and a shot list. And so a script outlines what is being spoken in the video, and then a shot list outlines what actually will be seen in the footage. So that's really, really important to map out exactly what's being said in a video, but also what's happening on screen or what things you need within the shot. And I'll show you an example in a moment. When it comes to interviews, they don't require any kind of storyboard, a little bit less planning. It's mainly just a really nice solid set of questions, short, sharp, succinct questions that can be sort of answered in quite a short relative amount of time, because we want to keep them fairly short. And you can advise people you're interviewing to give nice, short, sharp answers, so you're not having to go back and edit, cut out lots of material. All right. The other important thing is when you're thinking about developing your script for what you want people to say, is you really want to break it down into really nice, small, what we call manageable chunks. And what that means is that you don't want a person having to stand in front of a camera and be delivering a huge monologue that they may not be able to get through in one go. They might make mistakes. And it's also tiresome. So what we tend to do is, when we're looking at storyboards and scripts, I should say, is that you have small paragraphs of text that they can easily get through in one go. And then, the next paragraph might be a different kind of shot. It might be a shot of them a little bit further away, or instead of a shot of them, it might cut to a shot of something else, like something else in the scene, or an image or a PowerPoint slide or whatever. And the reason that's really, really good is that if a person does get through their script and they make a mistake, they've only got a little bit way to go to get back to the start. Whereas if they've done a huge monologue and they make a mistake and they don't want to go back to the start, then you're going to have those sort of YouTube-y kind of jump cuts that we're probably getting a little bit more used to, and they're a little bit more accepted, but generally they look a little bit weird, where a person's speaking and they just jump and quickly cut to another section of the video because you've cut out a mistake. So that's quite important. And yeah,
Tim,
sorry, I've got a question.
Yeah, a good question about the time you might allow in order to do the pre-production parts. What's a sensible time frame for that?
For developing a storyboard, or just getting the whole thing kind of...
Yeah, getting ready to actually start filming.
Yeah, like it all kind of depends how complex the actual shoot is. Obviously, if it's something like a shoot in a lab, it's going to be much more complex and take longer. Whereas if it's an interview, then it might just take a few hours to kind of think about and develop the kind of questions you might want to ask. You'll have to book in spaces. So certainly, I think if it's an interview, it'd probably take only maybe a couple of hours to sort of have a bit of a think about the kind of questions you want, book in spaces, and also, contact the people and wrangle people. If it's more of a larger shoot, like you're on location and you're going to be doing a much more complex script, that might take several hours, because you have to really, really think about exactly what you want the person to say. You have to try and organize the equipment that's going to be used on set. So that will take many more hours of pre-production. And the more sort of organization you do in pre-production, the more smooth the actual production will go. Yeah, it's hard to put an actual official time on it, because they vary so much. But yeah, maybe a couple of hours for a script, for and wrangling an interview, and for several hours to actually organize much more complex shoot. Yeah.
My experience is the logistics of organising the location and the human and getting those
Yes.
right, getting those calendars to align tends to be the thing that takes the longest. So
Yes,
the
exactly
earlier you
right.
start thinking about your talent
Yeah.
and the location, the better. I'm sure many people in the room would agree.
Exactly right. Yeah. And when it comes to interviews as well, it's always good, and it's okay to send the questions ahead of time as well. Because you may find that the person gets the questions and they're like, I can't actually answer any of these. That it's not my area or something like that. So it's always good to sort of send questions beforehand to get a bit of an idea that they can actually answer them. Yeah. So as I said, if you're going to be having someone presenting to camera, try and make the dialogue fairly short. And in the script or the storyboard, what we also get people to do is indicate the kind of shot that you're actually going to be producing. This is really, really handy in planning because there's literally like a column in the storyboard, and is the storyboard next? Where are we? So there's literally a column on the left that says shot type and number, and that allows you to give that particular shot a number, but also give that shot what we call a shot type. And this is the kind of shot that you're actually creating. So for example, you generally might start off a piece of video of someone presenting. They might be like a close-up, and it's a close-up of them speaking and talking through something. And then you might, in the next shot for shot number 2, you might cut to like a half shot, which might be half their body to the top of their head. And then you indicate in the script section what they're speaking for that particular shot. And then shot 3, if it's say maybe cutting to an image, we would indicate that with FS or full screen. And again, in the script area, you would have what they're saying for that particular time where that full screen graphic is on the screen. So breaking those dialogue up into separate shots really, really helps with making the shots more interesting, but also making the dialogue quite short. So this is a bit of an example of the kind of shots that you might use. Things like extreme long shots and long shots, and you can see the little abbreviations, LS, XLS, VLS. They're really good for establishing scenes. So you might be establishing, your first shot might be establishing the building you're in, or a pan of the lab or something like that. And then you might cut to a close-up or a mid-shot of a person speaking, and then you might cut to full screen shots of like a full screen slide in PowerPoint or whatever. So it really depends on what kind of shooting situation you are. If you're in a lab and you want to see all the equipment, you might start off with more of a longer shot, and then as it progresses, you're getting closer to the action. But if there's nothing in the shot that you need to focus in on or anything like that, and the surroundings of where you're filming doesn't matter, you might start off with more of a close-up or a mid-shot and focus on the person speaking. And so in terms of an actual example of a bit of a script, so I've got a script here so we do a lot of studio videos here where people come into our studio and film. And it's very similar to other kind of shoots where you have a column where you identify what kind of shot it is, close up, and then you literally see for that close up, they said one sentence. Very easy to get through, very short and sharp. And then you expand on that information a little bit more with, say, a full screen slide where you then, in this last column is really good for putting in imagery or objects that you might be having on screen as that person's speaking. So in this example, it's the reason it's got PowerPoint slides here is because these are a PowerPoint presentation that a person actually stands in front of and presents in front of the image. So that's why you're seeing that image. But this could be you could just do a cartoon drawing or just get an image off the internet of just a person's head to indicate that's the kind of close-up you're going to want. Or you could use that column to just put in pictures of the location that you might want the person to be standing in. So you can use that last column for planning your shots, or in this case, actually putting the actual images that are going to be used. And you'll see here in these blocks here that, there's not much spoken in that bit there. The person can get through it quite easily. This, again, that's one shot. That person can get through that quite easily. So it's just a matter of just breaking things up into nice, easily speakable chunks, which is handy. And I'll provide this storyboard template to everyone as well at the end of the presentation. Sorry, I just need to have a a swig. So as I mentioned earlier, we do offer a writing educational media course, so that's available in Workday. So when I'll send through these slides, you'll be able to click on that link and enroll in that. And essentially it sort of takes you through how to create storyboards and things like that for creating educational media and how to structure things. So much more detail than I went into. It does have a bit of a focus more on studio recording and recording on your desktop, but definitely the skills in there that relate to creating a script and storyboarding and stuff works across you know, a variety of different kinds of media that you can produce. So production. So once you've actually decided what kind of video you're going to produce, you've got a bit of a storyboard together, you've got your script, you know where you're going to, you've got a bit of an idea of who you're going to film and where you're going to film it. Probably one of the first things you need to do is set up your phone. So I'll talk about the setup for iPhone and Android. Now, the nice thing about iPhones is they tend to have a very similar, well, they do, they have the same settings across all devices. Android, they tend to have, there might be a few changes here and there depending on the model that you have, but I can just sort of guide you in the general kind of settings that you might want to use. So, you know, we tend to recommend people using their phones to set it to, well, yeah, this is a sort of a hard one because you also have to decide what you're wanting to do with the footage before you kind of think about what size of the video. And what I mean size, I mean pixel size. Like, you know, is it going to be high definition? Is it going to be 4K? So you need to have a bit of a think about that. In most cases, just recording at a 1080p HD 30, which is probably a setting you've seen in your phones before. It means the video is going to be a full HD video, which is the vast majority of videos that you'll sort of watch on a day-to-day basis. And what we call 30 frames per second. So that's the amount of images per second generated to generate the video. Now, 30 frames per second is sort of one of the more commonly used frame rates that are more compatible with videos you might get from stock video sources, videos you might record from your screen on your computer. So that's why we tend to sort of steer people towards that. But the other option is you can record in 4K. Now, 4K is good for a few reasons. Now, obviously, you're getting more resolution, so you kind of are getting a bit of a nice high quality picture. But the nice thing about filming in 4K is something called 4K punch-in, which I'll give an example in a moment. What 4K punch-in allows you to do is it allows you to effectively almost feel like you've got two cameras. So you can set up your phone and you can record in 4K. And then when you're editing, you can actually edit in a lower resolution timeline. So you can edit in a high definition timeline. But what's nice about that is when you bring in a really high res video into a lower resolution timeline, essentially you can zoom that footage in without losing any quality. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis with all our videos, is that we record in 4K, and then to break up the shot, we will then just simply zoom in while we're editing, and we're not losing quality because of the high resolution of our footage. So that's something you need to consider. If your phone may not do 4K, and most do nowadays, or you may not have the space to film 4K, so that might be a limitation. But 4K is really, really good option for punching in later on, making it look like you've got multiple cameras. The other thing to consider is that, you know, if there's any parts of your video that you might want to be slow motion, you can record those at 60 frames per second. That just means you're getting more images per second. And that means that you can actually slow that down to half, which will be 30, which means you'll get that really nice, smooth, slow motion. But of course, phones also have like, you know, 240 or more slow motion setting if you really want to go down that route of really slow motion. But sometimes, you know, just halving it from 60 to 30 is enough. Also, in terms of video size, it's also always good to maybe tick the box for high efficiency on your phones. It just means that your file will be a little bit more smaller in file size and still quite good quality. And it's still compatible with, because you've got an option here, most compatible and high efficiency, but really this high efficiency file format is quite widely acceptable by most video editors, so you shouldn't have any dramas. The rules are generally the same with setting up an Android phone. It's just they might look a little bit different. You know, instead of saying 1080p, and 1080p just means that the video is not 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels high. That's what that means. Full HD is another word for it. And so yeah, on an Android device, it'll be sort of listed like that. Again, if you can shoot 4K, that's always a great option. Setting stabilization on is great because it'll smooth out your footage. And again, reduce file size is a little bit like the high efficiency option on iPhone as well. So as I mentioned with the 4K.
Tim, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you got a question?
We have another good question about storage space.
Yep.
And how do you recommend an appropriate, how much storage space you might need on your phone to do this kind of filming?
Yeah, so the nice thing about iPhone is, and I don't know if it came up here, is that it actually has, yeah, so there you go. So a minute of video so if you're doing 4K at 30 frames per second, it's 170 megabytes per minute. So essentially you just need to sort of work out if you're going to be filming for an hour, 170 megabytes times 660, and then you got to see how many gig that's going to take up on your phone. So yeah, you can use that as a bit of a rough guide to sort of see how much space your video might take. It is very easy to fill up phones quite fast, but nowadays phones have got quite a heck of a lot of storage. So yeah, it's just a matter of just checking in with that, and you can use that as a bit of a guide, I think. Yeah. So shooting 4K, so as you can see, 4K is you know, in yellow there is much bit bigger than full HD, and that kind of really means that you can sort of see here if you have a 4K piece of video that you put into a full HD timeline, you can literally take that little section there and make it look like you're zooming in. And an example is on the next slide, whereby if I just record in a normal HD piece of video, the video looks beautiful. But if I zoom that in and I'm actually working in a full HD project, you know, zooming in is going to look pixelated. It's not going to look very nice. But if I'm working on a full HD timeline, again, the 4K footage, when it's squished down to sort of fit, it's still going to look beautiful. It's going to look as beautiful as 1080. But the ability is then you can actually zoom that footage out to get a really, really nice close-up. So you can break up shots without having multiple cameras. So really, really handy. So shooting your footage. You know, it goes without saying that if you're wanting to shoot a piece of footage, try and find the quietest place you can, which is much light as possible, because I have to understand that a lot of people might not be able to get access to Bluetooth microphones. They might not be able to get access to good lighting. So it's important to find the right location for your shoot. We tend to steer people away from, you know, shooting in front of windows and such. Windows that have like those partially block out blinds are really, really beautiful because they give you kind of the look of a window, but you don't get that real overexposure of the background. So if you have a window like that, that's really, really good. A lot of offices at UQ do that. But if you don't, then maybe just moving the presenter to the other side of the room where you have that natural light coming in directly on them, that can work really, really well. And in terms of finding the quietest place, this comes down to what you're filming. If you're filming an interview, obviously you want it to be in a very quiet place. Boardrooms are really nice. But also things in context can work as well. If you're filming in a busy area and, you know, it's expected that it's busy and it's expected that there's going to be noise, then people are going to be fine with that. But if you're filming in a boardroom that's quite quiet and then you're hearing people chatter in the background, that's going to be like, oh, that doesn't sound right. So it all depends. And also if you're filming in a lab, it's expected to be loud if it's a lab. So that's fine. And so if you don't have a microphone, you can get as close to the subject as possible while getting the vital elements in. Phones have quite good microphones. They often have microphones on both sides, on the front and back. Or you can go down the route of getting some kind of Bluetooth microphone that might plug in to the bottom of it and Bluetooth, and you can just clip it on to the subject. They're getting actually quite cheap, and you can just look up online for Bluetooth wireless microphones for phones. Always holding the landscape. This is one of those rules is always hold landscape, because if you record in portrait, doesn't translate well to video, and also trying to zoom that up and stuff is not really going to work very well. And it's this next point sort of depends on the subject matter, but sometimes it is nice to start off with a bit of a wider shot, establishing shot, so you can see what's kind of in the scene, like that example I showed in the lab. And then you sort of can cut in a little bit closer to show individual shots as well. And again, if you don't have two cameras, you can do the 4K punch-in. That's a really good way around having two cameras. But if you have access to two cameras, you might have one on the subject, and then you might have another one that's maybe roaming around, literally just holding it, recording it, and moving it around, getting closer to what the person is talking about. Yeah. And also just remember when you're shooting cutaway shots. So cutaway shots are the kind of shots that you just sort of intersperse amongst your footage. So someone might be talking, and then you intersperse cutaway shots in that. Yeah, it's always good to maybe just make sure you're not speaking over the top of that, because sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of the background noise happening as well. Like if you're filming a cafe, it's funny how many sort of times you'll be filming a cafe and then you forget that you're having a chat with someone, or you're on the phone and you can hear it in the background when you really, really wanted the cafe sound. So sort of be careful of that as well. So if you have someone who's presenting to camera, it's always good to kind of keep track of the shot you're taking, and also indicate in the footage that a shot's about to start. So a really, really good way of that is when you've got your storyboard, it'll have all those shot numbers, is, you press record, you say, this is shot 3 and action, and then the person should wait around about 2 to 3 seconds before speaking. And the reason we do that is just so there's a little bit of room to kind of cut around. You don't want a person, as soon as it says action, to start speaking straight away, because you want that kind of few seconds before they start speaking to sort of speak around. Sorry, I'm losing my voice already. Wow, I'm out of practice. Another really good way of getting people more comfortable on camera and not having to memorize is using a teleprompter. Though when most people think of a teleprompter, they think of, or kind of what's here is a camera with an iPad or something on it, or like a big setup where they have a camera and it has the glass in front of the lens and it's projecting the text onto the lens. They're really, really helpful, but you can do them in a really bodgy way. So you can literally have your phone and you can have another phone above it with the text scrolling on it, or an iPad directly above the lens of the camera. Or you can set up your phone and maybe have a laptop near it, and you scroll the text on your laptop. Or there are some apps where you can actually record, you can actually use the front-facing camera and have the script scrolling using the front-facing camera, so you don't have to have a separate device, which is quite handy. So yeah, it's always good to have some sort of script, if possible, that people can read off. But understand that sometimes it's not possible if they're doing some kind of procedure in a lab or something, and they're simply not able to concentrate on reading a script. So that's something you need to be sort of considerate of. If you are going to go down the route of a teleprompter and you're going to have like a script above the lens, yeah, make sure it's above. Don't put the script beside or below. And it's good if it's on a digital device, so you can have the text quite large and then scroll through it, which is quite important. Yeah. And also ticking off your shots as you do them is important, so you can keep track of things. And obviously encourage your participants to be far more animated than they normally would be in their day-to-day lives. So shooting your footage, it's important to try and avoid shaky footage. This can be avoided with using a gimbal or something like that. So gimbals are quite cheap now, that you lock your phone into and you hold it and it stays quite stable. Or maybe some kind of tripod that you can sit it on as well. And some tripods now have lights built into them. You can go to Kmart and get it for 20, 30 bucks, pretty cheap now. And so that's a really good way to sort of reduce the shakiness in your footage. Also, when you're composing your shots and you're moving your camera around, you can use that to your benefit. So if you're doing a video where it might just be something that's a little bit more relaxed video, Botanical Gardens, hotel, shops, something a bit more relaxed, and Your movements of your camera might be a little bit more slow. So if you're handheld with the gimbal or you're holding it steady with your body, the shots might tend to be a little bit more slow. But if you're talking about the inner city and the buzz of society and stuff in the city, then you might be a little bit more fast with your movements of your camera, really quick pans and make it a little bit more dynamic. So you can just kind of suit the movement of your camera to the type of shoot that you're doing. And also when you're out on a shoot, try and get your vital shots first, because if you're running out of time, it's important to get all the really important shots first, and then maybe there's some nice to have shots to have later on, which is kind of, you know, if you don't get those, then it's not a big deal. Yeah. And also, you know, try to avoid taking really, really long takes as well. It's nice again to sort of chunk up the footage so you're not having quite long takes. But of course that depends on the actual shoot. If you've got a person demonstrating something and they're standing there for a long period of time, then yeah, you might just press record for the whole entire time. Or, you know, if a person makes a mistake, you might choose to stop and then start it again, just so you're not having to have really, really long videos that you have to go through and try and find your individual clips. And always check your footage before you leave a shoot to make sure that it's actually worked. Obviously, you know, if you're filming in public, you can film in public places. Just be mindful that some people may not like to be on camera. If a person is kind of the main focus of what you're recording, or they're going to be speaking, then obviously you need to get some kind of permission from them, and you can get written permission. UQ has written photography and video consent forms, and also, you know, wherever you're filming, you know, if it's on private land and often in public buildings, even though some public buildings you can film in, it's always good to just talk to security and say you're wanting to film in here or whatever, just in case you might get in trouble. And so the other thing is you can always consult the, I'll have this link here for you to have a look at. There's information on OMC marketing communications about that. So you'll be able to read this information and get your head across what you can and can't do. So I'll talk about composition. So composition is quite important when you're filming your videos. Things like headroom. So just having enough headroom above a subject. So you never want to have them kind of their head too close to the top of the frame or have it chopped off. Generally, the closer they are, you can have a little bit less headroom. And so the further away, the more headroom you have. And, you know, depending on whether you want to center the person or have them off to the side, kind of depends on the subject matter. It's entirely fine to sort of use at your discretion. It's obviously always good to keep the person at eye line level so you don't have the camera too low or too high. And so that always, you know, it makes them feel like they're more on your level, or if it's low, they seem more dominating. If the camera's too high, they might seem a little bit more submissive. So yeah, it's important to keep the camera nice and eye line with your subject. And also, you know, you want to sort of have the person locking eyes onto the camera as much time as possible, unless they're of course referring to something within the shot. So trying to keep that eye contact with the camera as much as possible is good. That's with presenting to camera. Interviews, they're a bit different. So interviews, you don't look at the camera. Maybe if you're going to be doing a quick introduction to I'm here with blah blah blah, we're going to talk about blah blah blah, you might look at the camera first. But generally, you sort of have them sort of positioned like this, using what we call the rule of thirds. So you tend to have that person sort of sitting in that sort of in that quadrant there, the intersection of those quadrants, and so it also allows for a little bit of headroom, a little bit of looking space. So looking space is this area in front of the person as well. So it gives them space to kind of look like they have sort of room to breathe and room to speak, whereas if they were over here looking that way, it wouldn't look great. And so with interviews, yeah, you tend to avoid looking at the camera unless you're doing some kind of introduction. And again, just making sure you have some kind of headroom. And the nice thing about if you do shoot 4K with interviews is that if someone's having a response and they make a mistake, then you can use that 4K punch in to get a little bit closer and sort of bridge that mistake so you can cut that out in editing. So yeah, they're very sort of much more versatile if you have a 4K camera. But look, you know, you might decide that for one question, if you only got one camera, you don't have 4K, one question you might record further away. The next question might record a little bit closer. So, you know, it's all up to you and what kind of equipment you have. The next thing to sort of talk about are voiceover. So if you're doing a kind of presentation where you're not wanting to speak in the field, you're wanting to do a voiceover at a later time, you know, a lot of microphones on devices now are really, really good. So even you know, microphones on your laptops nowadays are pretty good. Microphones on your phones are really good. It's just a matter of sort of trying to find an area that is a little bit what we call like a dead space, which means there's not much echo, not much reverberation. This room I'm in here is all padded around the edge. It's a padded room and it feels a bit weird on your ears, but it's quite dead. So places that have like curtains on the walls and things like that work really well, but sort of hard surfaces tend to reverberate. So one tip is, you know, you can put a doona over your head and record your voiceover, whether that be on your laptop, or you might have a nice podcaster microphone, like a USB microphone plugged into your computer that you can use. Generally, they work well sort of outside of, you don't really need padded rooms or anything fancy for those, but it's sort of the more smaller microphones, maybe on your phones as well, that you might want to hop under a doona with your script and record it. And yeah, so phones are great. You just, you know, I'd probably suggest instead of using like the voice memo app is maybe actually just record just blank video and just take the audio from that instead. And again, you know, it's just a matter of when you are presenting voiceovers to have that sort of confident melodic tone and good projection. So you may want to source images and videos for your productions. You may not be able to source them yourself. You may not be able to film them yourself. So you do have access to Adobe Stock that has video and imagery that you can use in your productions. You also need to be aware that a lot of them are paid, but there is a free section of videos. It's a little bit hard to find. You could go into the filters and find the free videos in Adobe Stock. But yeah, there are quite a lot of other sort of outlets out there for getting free images and videos. And as long as you, in your videos, you reference them appropriately, then that's good. I mean, well, what we can't kind of say is that if you are using images that are from these kind of stock photography sites, you don't generally need to attribute each individual image. You just need to have some kind of message at the end saying that the images used in this video are from Adobe Stock. And if there's any images that are not, that are in your production, then you might be able to list them separately under that. One thing that is evolving is the AI generated imagery. So this is an evolving space and something that is changing all the time. And we've kind of gone a little bit down the rabbit hole on what you can and can't use in your productions at UQ in terms of AI generated imagery. And we've kind of come away with a bit of a guide. This is kind of a collection of what is a good practice at the moment and also what the university likes. But generally, they like to steer away from the use of AI-generated people or hero people, so images that feature a person predominantly, avoiding that if possible. But there is an exception to that. You know, if you need, and it's crucial to teaching, you need to generate an image of a person in a particular situation that you cannot film yourself or you can't get online, then you can generate that in AI, but it needs to be, you know, said that image needs to be as accurate and as realistic looking as possible. You know, we don't want extra fingers, extra arms, etc. It needs to be as real as possible. Also need to be where you don't want to use AI to alter the image of a person as well. So if you have an image of a person or a hero image, you don't want to be using AI to alter that beyond recognition. But in terms of what you are generally free to do is use AI imagery for scientific and abstract purposes. So, you know, if you needed an image of a dice and you couldn't find a nice one, you know, you can use AI to generate that. And you know, if you need an image of a molecule and you generate that, and obviously just making sure it is the correct molecule, looks right. Obviously, there are copyright issues around that. You don't own anything. The university doesn't own anything that is created through the AI-generated imagery. The larger production that AI-generated image exists in is copywritten, but the actual individual elements within images aren't. And obviously referencing them appropriately. So you need to indicate within your productions when something has been generated. And so that can be done. If it's an Adobe stock, we're generally saying, you know, just put Adobe stock generated with AI near the image. If it's something that you generated in another AI generative program, put the actual prompt and what platform you used near that particular image as well. And obviously just use good judgment, avoid, you know, generating culturally sensitive imagery and just things that don't feel right to be generated, you probably shouldn't be generating. All right, so the very last thing I want to talk about, and I'll talk about this briefly just because it's covered in the course I'll be doing tomorrow, is the editing process. So essentially taking all your footage from your devices, bringing it into the computer, and editing it. Now, of course, you can edit on device. So if you're filming with an iPad, for example, you can edit on the device, which might save you time than trying to transfer it. But yeah, most computers nowadays are pretty capable of handling some sort of video editor, and there's quite a lot of options out there. I think, you know, there's one built into Windows. There always sort of has been. Adobe Rush, which you have access to, DaVinci Resolve, which is free to download, and iMovie, which is built into Mac OS. And the nice thing about all video editing software, even if you just learn one, is those skills translate really, really well across all of them. They really are importing files, arranging them, exporting at the correct kind of quality. So file management's incredibly important, you know, and, you know, trying to send files wirelessly from your phone to the computer can be problematic. So always try and plug in and get your files directly off the device that way, because you're going to be dealing with quite large files, and transferring over the air sometimes can be problematic. Keeping everything in one nice folder, because if you start moving stuff around or renaming files, the software can lose track of that quite easily and can freak out. And obviously when you are editing your videos, make sure you're using UQ approved video templates. The UQ Digital Asset Management platform has a lot of the UQ video templates that you can use. And if you do the course tomorrow, I'll be actually sending out that template. But I can provide it to you as well if anyone's interested in investigating using a UQ approved template. I can send that to you as well. Just flick me an email and reach out. And yeah, and most video editors have really, really nice export presets, and they're essentially presets that relate to the quality of the video that's going to be exported from the program, in terms of how large it's going to be in terms of physical size, file size, and making it compatible with quite a wide range of learning platforms, whether it be on YouTube or Blackboard or wherever. So that's me. That's my email address if anyone wants to reach out for any advice, and I'll send this this slide deck out after the presentation. But we've got a few more minutes, and I was just wondering, you know, if anyone had any questions. Were there any questions in the chat that were particularly needed me to jump on?
I've also launched the evaluation poll if anyone wants to give any feedback. Tim, there was a question about any apps in particular you recommend for screen reader. I think some Emma's answered that question, but if there is an app that you recommend off the top of your head, that was the only other question so far.
As in like a teleprompt program?
Yeah, teleprompter, sorry, correct.
What's the one we use? We used, it's an app on the iPad, like Teleprompter Plus, or I'll have to look into it because I can't remember the name. I know what the icon looks like and everything, but can't remember the name.
What was the one you recommended, Emma?
There's Teleprompter, which is the free one, and then Teleprompter Pro.
I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, just a simple, nice, simple one that's not cluttered with features. It just works nicely. Yeah.
And there's another one out there that again I can't remember the name of, but it would be searchable. Is the one where you can just flip the camera around and read it as it's scrolling. Teleprompter Pro probably has that built in anyway, but there's some other ones out there that instead of, you know, trying to have a separate device with the teleprompter on there above your camera, you can just use the front-facing camera and literally read as you're recording. But be aware the front-facing cameras on phones aren't as good as the back ones. Yeah, and may not be able to get you 4K as well. So.
And then, Tim, there's just one final question around generating transcripts.
Yep.
If you want to answer that, or maybe that's something you'll cover tomorrow.
So transcripts, obviously we need to make stuff incredibly accessible. That's one of the very important things that we need to do at UQ. So there's a few ways to generate transcripts. One way is if you have a script for your video already, so Blackboard, that upload does have a facility to upload transcripts into that. It doesn't let you sync it. Oh, yes, it does. It does. So I think you can use it to sort of to put your transcript up there. Also, YouTube is really good for it. So you can, if you're uploading stuff to YouTube, what you can do is you can literally just paste your script into YouTube and it'll sync it up with the video, which is really, really handy. And if you don't have any kind of script generated and it was just something that was spoken off the top of someone's head, then Premiere has really good auto-generated captions. So you can actually, in your timeline, and I can talk about this tomorrow, is you can generate a transcript based on that. But most platforms we have here, they can either accept a transcript that you generate or one that's, or you just paste in the actual text and it'll sync it up. Yeah. And also YouTube does automatic ones as well, but it's not as nice. It doesn't have as many punctuation and capitals, that kind of stuff in it, but yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool. All right. If there's no more questions, we might wrap it up there. So thank you very much for everyone for attending.